Christian Farmer. It's Tribeca Trading Group, and this is your Monday recap for first trading day of the week for August 25th. And so, quick theme, I would say, in this market. First of all, I think we saw a little bit of a what I like to refer to as a fade of Ruski for today. Kind of just the indices were quiet overnight. Qs try to lead a little bit today, but really just could not keep with the momentum from what we saw on Friday. So just kind of got more and more tired over the day. Do I think that's any major change in tone from what we saw on Friday? No, but perhaps we just were a little bit ahead of ourselves in terms of the price action. And it was, after all, a pretty awesome day. The breadth was huge. I see a lot of people talking about what I talked about on Friday about NYSE over 90% up day in terms of up volume. I see that making your rounds a lot today. Again, one of the things that I kind of take a little bit of pride in is that we go over these things, decently ahead of everybody else. So you got that news. I talked a lot about that on Friday about how it was a huge breadth day. Now, that doesn't mean that the market just continues to skyrocket higher. I think that you still have to be selective into the end of August and in September, which is a weak seasonal month, which I'm sure that you know that at this point. Let's move towards what we had last week, which was much more macro focused with that Powell speech on Friday. This week, I think it's going to turn more into more micro based. Now, we still have an inflation report that we're going to get at the end of the last trading day of the month, but you're going to get some pretty heavy earnings reports that are going to be some of the clues that you're going to see for the near term future. Hence, Nvidia reports after the close on Wednesday. That's going to be huge for not only the whole semi space, but for the AI space. And I imagine that. So my thought is that maybe their earnings are dynamite because of the China situation, and going back and forth with whether China is going to use their chips. Maybe they might have some other type of guidance slowdown because maybe folks have been really buying a lot of the chips ahead of the tariffs and ahead of the trade situation. But I think Jensen's going to do what he does, and he's going to talk things up. So I would think that you're going to get reactions in other names unless that the expectations are too high going into the report. And I don't know that they are. I don't think that the expectations are low, but I'm not sure that it's a really super high bar either, because I think people know about what's been going on with China. So, but it will be very important for the smaller names that are involved in AI. If Jensen kind of convinces everybody that AI is going to be a major theme and there's no slowdown or anything like that, then you will see some names be, I think, continue to outperform, and some names will probably underperform a bit too. That's what we've been seeing in that AI space. You're also going to get names like Snowflake, which will probably be somewhat important for software names, and CrowdStrike, which will definitely be important for cyber names. So I went over a couple of those things in the weekend member video, so I'm not going to rehash all of that, but that's a lot of reports. And even Thursday, once we get to Thursday, that's going to be a big day too. You've got things like Dell, Marvell, Affirm, Elastic, another software slash data type name. So it's going to be a big week of earnings. Breadth for today. This is by the way for my midday note. You can get the midday note with by signing up at the link that's scrolling on the bottom of the screen. But this didn't seem right to me comparatively to what we saw yesterday, which was 90% up volume in the New York Stock Exchange. Today, midday was 42, and I think it ended today around like 36, 37. So really weak breadth. The small caps were the culprit there. I'm going to get through that chart. You probably already know what I'm going to say about small caps if you've been listening to some of my videos. We smacked right into an upside VPOC on Friday. That is an area that has been not the easiest thing for the small caps. So I know there's another thing that I see floating around on the internet about how hedge funds have a big short position in IWM. Is that going to make me go long IWM? No. I think that's interesting. But I think that what's more interesting is paying attention to the price action and knowing that IWM really moves on big events, big macro events, such as a Powell speech, such as a Fed meeting, such as a CPI report. That's where IWM moves the most. So you can position, I think, what may make sense depending on where what IWM has is doing into some of these events. Yeah, you could take some calls into those events, maybe some short-term calls, something where you're not investing a lot of money, because that's where you usually get the biggest bang for your buck is on these big event days with IWM for small caps. So breadth was not particularly good. Let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to go through in here. Um, I wrote a note about Apple, which saw some call buying today. Not a lot of 52 4-week new highs versus new lows today. It was just quiet comparatively to what we saw on Friday. And again, I think that's okay, right? There usually is some digestion after you have a move like we saw on Friday. Here's the performers for the day. It wasn't just small caps that were not particularly good. It was really the cryptos, right? And you know, I think that you have to kind of go back to like sometimes this market just likes to fool a lot of people, right? A lot of people were very impressed and thought like that's it, like cryptos are going to blast off after Friday, including myself. Like I thought that Bitcoin had a false breakdown below the 50-day moving average, got back. But, I guess that there's a lot of liquidations going on there. Remember, cryptos are different than regular equities in terms of margin calls. If there's a lot, like you could look on some of these sites to see how many folks are on margin in cryptos. Like I think there's a couple of places that publish that data. And when you see a lot of people that are leveraged long, what happens is if there is a big move down for whatever reason, right? And there's a 2 or 3% move to the downside, it often will get exasperated further to the downside because there isn't any like with margin calls for equity, like they call you and you have time to satisfy that margin call. Not with crypto's different. Crypto, you get liquidated, right? Once you go through your threshold, they just liquidate your crypto. You don't have a chance to meet that margin call. So that's why you see these like big moves in cryptos. And again, I'm not an expert in crypto. I just know a little bit of things like this. There, you don't get a call when you're heavy on margin, right? They just liquidate you down to where you should be. And so that could create some volatile situations. So the Bitcoin ETF was down 5% today. Big step down. I'm going to go. Don't worry, I will go over that chart with you in just a second. Areas that outperformed today, areas that are kind of unpopular. Energy, which was doing very well last week too. Remember, I highlighted in Friday's video that was one of the biggest surprises to me was that OIH was like I think the biggest group that was up last week. Well, XOP, which is the equally weighted energy and gas ETF, tacked on another 1% today. So again, it's unpopular, right? It's not overcrowded like a lot of the other areas that I'm going to get to a minute in this video. Metals and mining also had another strong move today, up 0.7 of a percentage point today. All right. So what underperformed? Biotech, which that goes along a little bit with what small caps are doing. Transports had a bad day, down 1.9%. Medical devices, consumer staples 1.7. So a lot of the defenses were down even more. Let's see what growth versus value did today. Yeah, value was down 0.8 of a percentage point, and growth actually did like pretty well today. It still finished down on a relative basis, still finished down 0.2 of a percentage point, but it was really the value areas of the market besides energy and the metals and mining. It was a lot of healthcare staples and those kinds of groups today. Also, the home building stocks took a step back today, down 1.2%. All right, let's get to some charts. So I'm going to start with what am I going to start with? I'm going to start with the small caps because I think like this is where like the indicator that I use, the MarketWebs, which uses the best like volume and price model that I know that's out there. But we hit this VPOC. I don't know too many people talking about that. We took out this VPOC and that's it. That's an upside target. Would I be pressing into that? No, I would not. And I'd wait for this to maybe check all the way down a bit. Notice what happened. And I can give you a perfect example of this the last time that we took out a VPOC over here, which was right in here. Right? What did we do for like 2 months? Basically nothing. Down, then up, then down, then up. Right. And then finally we started to kind of move and take this out. And then we checked back in here. So that's what I would think. Maybe a check back to the 5 day moving average. But again, it might just continue to be maybe not the market leader, but it will give you some trading opportunities once you get kind of like to the lower end of the range or check back to the previous breakout. I'm not sure if I don't trade IWM that much, but I would kind of be waiting for maybe a check back to the 5 day moving average. And that could be several inside days off that candle. But again, this is a big overhead supply area. And it's not to say that that overhead supply is always going to win out. But a lot of times you see some digestion, a little bit of fading there, and that's a lot of times where I'm always going to be a seller into a upside VPOC takeout, and definitely not a buyer. All right, IWC, which I think I went over a little bit too, which is microcaps. Again, there's nothing wrong with this candle today. Right, this also took out a VPOC. Watch it probably checks back to this VPOC. Price probably checks back in here. And again, that wouldn't even be that bad. You would still be holding above the 5 day moving average. So things just got a little bit extended, and they got extended fast for for some of these, after that big day that we had on Friday. Now let's talk about the cryptos for a minute. This is not a good look, right? And again, sometimes the market's going to fake you out a little bit. That happens. You can't really avoid that. That's going to happen from time to time. But here was your break below the 50-day moving average. Friday, we go right back in here. Now, what I did say before I knew what cryptos were doing in Sunday's video, I said, hey, I'm even though they made it back into the range, I'm still not like in love with this chart. It just kind of got us back to the middle of this, almost the middle of this range and some resistance. So that's what I said on Sunday. Now, did I think we were going to go down 5% and take out the lows from Thursday? No, I didn't think that either. But this is not a very good look here. So that's Bitcoin. What about Ethereum, which has been outperforming? So far, just an inside day. Now, that's a hell of an inside day, down 8%. But again, these things move differently than stocks do, which, so in any event, and a lot of interesting moves in this space. BMNRN, which I got long on Friday, took a step back, but is still holding above that 5 period moving average. So for now, I'm holding this. Definitely didn't like it down at a 7% move. But again, position size is important in these things. You can't like have the same size as of something like this as you do in, I don't know, Robinhood, for example, right? And looking at the ATRs will help you. The average true range, you could kind of get a sense of how much these things move in a given day, and that volatility will help you assess what you could back into your position size. Which I'm not going to go over that right this second because it'll be too long of a video. But that's how I do it. I look at the ATR, and then you can kind of divide that by the stock price and say, okay, well that's what it moves a day. Now think about how many shares that you want to own based on that volatility. All right, BMNRN, another one too. Speaking of, since we're on a roll here talking about VPOCs, which is open door technologies, right? And again, if you're not familiar with this concept of version point of control, remember it's not volume point of control. Or I see some people quote that this is version point of control. What that means is that price is getting to an area where there was a huge amount of volume that happened in the past and we haven't revisited yet. And the market remembers because it essentially means overhead supply, right? When a VPOC is above price action, and when a VPOC is below, that means that it could be an area of demand where buyers could step in, right? In this sense, for now, the sellers won out, right? The sellers really, decided to sell. But, because again, you have to think about this psychologically. There's been people who have been long this stock, gets up to the finally gets them back to break even, and they want out from holding for a long time, right? That's why it's such an important concept, and that's why having the market webs tells you exactly where that lurks, right? And if you're like a long-term believer in open door, right, still it makes sense to have a sense of the technicals, right? And that's what the market webs help you do, is to take some of the emotion. And I know this is a very emotionally passion charged name, but if you know where there's a big overhead supply, you can trim into that position, right? That doesn't mean that you dislike the stock. You're just trimming, right? And then if the stock does a rejection, right, and it may check back here, then you could add back to your original position. It doesn't mean that you're not bullish. It just means you're kind of being smart, right? And I know that kind of gets lost in some of these names, but understanding where there's that overhead supply can help you lock in some profits, right? And that is a big thing in trading. Right. So in any event, that was at 550. Watch to see what happens. There's another VPOC all the way up here at 7. That doesn't mean that this story is over in open door, but for now, the sellers won out. Right. And that's again, that's at 550. So let it build back up. Right. Notice what happened in here. The same thing. There was 3 of these VPOCs that was taken out. Now, the next day, it tried to power through and got rejected. That was when it was at 380. It fell all the way back to $2. So that's exactly what I'm saying, right? If you sold some in here, you were able to reload back into this. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about for this, and maybe somewhere back in here, and then it maybe bases and then tries to rev up again. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, but that's what I would think logically. I did not go over SPY and Qs. I just want to go over that quickly. One of the things that I talked about with the SPY chart on Friday was that we did not take out the highs. Remember this value area that I talked about that we kind of ran into? So I said, this is not going to be, you're not going to have to worry about this level, because that was the value area for last week. But you will have to pay attention to the new value area for this week, which is based on all of last week's activity. Notice what we did here. And this was kind of tough because we checked back in the morning, then we try to go, but we just, the market just did not have enough in the tank today to kind of keep going. So we checked back. So this is what I would be watching for tomorrow, is right where we closed today, right around the 642.90 level, or right around where we're trading now, I guess, in the after hours. Let's see if that little check back will hold. If it doesn't, then I would say watch in here. So these are two areas of interest. More important for me is probably the top of value. I would like to see us hold here, because then we don't really have any major resistance. If we check back here, then you're going to have to battle again with that overhead, the top of the value area for the week, which will act, what is support will act as resistance if we break down to here. All right, Qs, different looking picture. Even though they try to get going today, notice that they failed at where they did on Friday, the Qs, and also broke back into the value area for the week. So again, a little like peekaboo outside of the value area for the week, but that's a rejection. And the level that remains to watch is 571.50. I said that on Twitter earlier, and then I would watch this level here around 573. So that's what I'm watching in the indices. Again, things are going to get mixed up, not mixed up, but jostled around with all the earnings reports. Some names to go through of interest. I'm going to go through a couple of these names. MP Materials had a good day. This was a name that I got long last week. It didn't do anything on Friday, which I was a little bit concerned about, because I don't like when the market goes up as much as it did and a name that you're holding does nothing. But it just kind of held in here. There wasn't, it's one of these things where, hey, if your stock doesn't move and it's holding above the breakout area, you don't touch, right? You let it do what it's doing. Even though I wasn't impressed with the price action at the end of the week, but nice move here. Rocket Labs, which was a name on our weekend watch list. I actually had last week ASTS on the watch list, and I looked at this name, and I looked at, and by the way, nice support that this bounced off of last week, right back into kind of the 50-day moving average here. But I liked how Rocket Labs was a touch stronger. Here's Rocket Labs. I can bring up the right ticker. There's Rocket Labs, and again, it was just a little bit stronger here, closing on Friday above its 20-day moving average. So I did take some profits into this. I got long in the beginning of the day. I would have to think that maybe these stocks got going a little bit because SpaceX had to delay the launch. So it would be a little, even though like they're not the same exact stocks. I think that sometimes the psychological things like that, where SpaceX has something that doesn't go right for them, and Rocket Labs and ASTS you go up the other way. So you kind of just have to. That's why I took some profits, and now we'll see if it wants to get up to the top of the value area. That's where I would be selling more of my position. It got close to there. Maybe I'm being a little bit greedy because it got around like 49.50. And my target here was like 50.35. So in any event, I'm still wearing a position, and we'll see how that goes. Another couple names that I liked what they did today. Google talked about how Google had a big day on Friday. Right? There was a bunch of announcements that like three different and positive announcements for Google. So they had nice follow through. They outperformed up 1.1%. Um, AppLovin had a good day today too. Follow through from that up 2%. So if you're in some of these stocks, you probably we're not complaining about today because they acted extremely well. Um, let's go over Palantir and Hood. These two stocks, for whatever reason, are kind of going together for me, but I'm still watching with Palantir. It's nice that it's holding its 50-day moving average in here, which is good, right? It sells off at the beginning of the day and it's coming back. So is there a buy signal here yet? Well, there's a couple things depending on how you trade. You could just say I'm going to go long as long as it stays above the 50-day moving average. That's fine. I'm waiting for a move above its value area for the month, and that's right around this 160 level. Right, that's 160.26. So again, I will sit and watch for now in Palantir. Robinhood didn't do much of anything, which again, I think that that's fine. This stock has made such a big move. Stocks do this. They go on big runs, then they consolidate for a bit, and then they sometimes, and a lot of times, they resume their trend to the upside. But again, this may just need to shake out some of the weak hands in the stock and all that, euphoria that's in the stock. Same thing with Palantir, by the way. Right. And I detailed some fintech names that I really like for members over the weekend. SoFi is one of those names. Really nice, and this has the momentum right now. Big move today, up 4.5% after a killer move on Friday. So really nice follow through and in that name. A few other things. What else did I want to go over? Unity Software. Also, we saw some big call buying today, was up another 1.7%. Again, with the market down, like these stocks acted pretty well. NBIS to a lesser extent, well, it's still good, up 1.5% for the day. So again, these stocks did very well for the day. Not everyone in this space, like TEM, that's a bearish engulfing. It did not. It looked a little bit weak to me on Friday, not closing anywhere near the highs, and had this reversal today. So this is one maybe that's due. It looks like it's due for a little bit of sideways action, digestion, but ultimately it has been on a nice run recently. And then probably last but not least, Tesla. Um, Tesla, I did get long this today. This was a name that I went over on Friday. I am long this in the TTG trend portfolio as well, but very nice technical signal here. Right, move up here and tacked on some gains today. So that's it for today's video. And I think take it one day at a time and understand that things were a little bit stretched